Alright, I wanted to start this video off explaining that I often troll NASA. I make sure that every time they put out a video with new information or something that they're releasing to the public, that I correct them and make sure everybody is aware of the contradictory information that they put out the week before. So on top of trolling NASA and continuously making videos about their videos, or at least posting their videos and pointing out the contradictions about the videos previous or information previous and so on and so forth, I troll like space.com on social media, which you've seen from my previous videos. I've been permanently removed, my name, my social security number, all of that. They ask for my identification every single time, and I am disabled from using any social media accounts. So it's really hard to deal with it, but YouTube seems to be a separate entity than all of these social media accounts that can be made and used to publish my information or their information, or respond to their information, stuff like that. So on the internet here, on YouTube, I get to continuously troll them, and so Curious Elephant, Curious Droid, Vintage Space, PBS Spacetime, all of these, there's dozens of these places that use all of NASA's publications, ESA, Roscosmos, SpaceX, or Blue Origins, all of the various subcontractors as well as the major governments. We're talking about Cassandras lately because of India's now one of the major leaders in space exploration, and there's just the continuation of all of Jerusalem in on it, and the more and more we get, the more we're going to talk about it. So there's more channels each day. Each day we have to talk about the things that the channels are talking about, talks about more, and so we end up with things like this. Now, I usually end up trolling them pretty hard, and they end up making videos specifically about things that I'm talking about, or things that I get the majority of people talking about, or things that I end up talking with the majority of people that they were already talking about. Either way, videos get posted about what the majority of comments are. I usually end up with thousands of comments on one of my comments. The replies get long and long-winded and redundant and hostile and pointless. And so they usually end up going with the highest comments. And lately it's been, who is an astrophysicist, who isn't. I made a video a little while back. I think it got deleted for some reason. I must have violated a YouTube rule. Neil Tyson and anyone from the Planetary Society, you can't post their videos. Neil Tyson deGrasse, or Neil deGrasse Tyson, whatever his name is. Bill Nye, he's a big one. And that was a Bill Nye discussion I was having about how Bill Nye feels bad that he's not an astrophysicist. He's not even a real scientist because he doesn't have the degree. He's just in geology. So everyone is harping on him, and he's having a hard time with the fact that he's not taken seriously, and he's not taken as a credible scientist. So they've been doing things like this to get people interested in actually becoming a credited scientist in the fields that they would like to be in. So if you would like to be one, sign up to be one. That's not what the video is about, though. I would like to explain their newest video, and this is kind of interesting because just the other night, last night, I was discussing with my friends, an old acquaintance specifically, but with a couple other people about the hurricane and why it is going to be taking the upwards path, and how it built to the size it did, and how space weather actually assists or stops certain weathers from occurring on Earth here. And so the hurricane and the Earth-facing quiet, the giant coronal hole that we had was producing, it actually produces one of the largest gamma spikes that we've had in recorded history. It was a very interesting point. It was just 4 days ago. If you go back to spaceweather.com or any of NOAA's sites, stuff like that, you'll be able to look at those pictures. I suggest you do. They ended up, showing that the hurricane was affected by it, and that's why it's going to cause path. There was another Earth-facing quiet, coronal hole, that was going to be facing us, and they were expecting it to potentially cause it to backbuild again, slow down, and then backbuild and push over Florida and into the peninsula and end up coming up and hitting Alabama. I think that's why Trump went off on that fucking stupid nonsense about, is there or is there not going to be something in Alabama, and that was outdated. That was them first discussing the potential of it. However, there's sunspots that formed above that coronal hole, and everything changes very rapidly with these processes. So that was nonsense, and that's why it was yes, there was polar cusp flips, but there are individual polar points that are within our regional areas. And I was discussing later that evening with an old friend about how everyone misinterprets the larger North and South Pole as those, polar points for, the larger bands of magnetosphere as being, the same as like the smaller regional ones that you can see within our like high and low pressure fronts that you see on just your local weather news. A lot of the Doppler radar systems pick that up because it's measured within the stratosphere, because it reaches up to the upper mesosphere. And that's one of the new, actually, Van Allen belts that was recently discovered by an Australian astrophysicist, making there now 3 belts, which the Van Allen belts is a relative term. I'm actually going to touch on that in this video, but this video right here was published this morning after I got done trying to explain to my old friend and all of these people that I've talked to that when we talk about the polar cusps flip, it's different than polarity flips within regional areas, and that the Earth has, like the sun has sunspots that cause the alpha waves to come up and cross over, and that's, sometimes they release and we get the solar flares or CMEs. Well, these ones aren't, we don't release the same. We do actually release gamma rays, and we've just been able to record the Earth releasing large amounts of gamma rays and stuff, and it's actually a very interesting process. How the Earth releases, just like other celestial bodies can release gamma rays. It's a very interesting video. You should check it out. There's plenty of solar physicists who have better videos with graphics than I could present. So they're however talking about the larger poles, explaining about those aren't going to flip, and it's hard for me to explain to people the differences in them as well, but I wanted to touch on this video because it seems like every time I start explaining things thoroughly to everyone that I know and making everything on the internet kind of center focused on these situations, the magnetosphere, the properties of radiation, and the deadly environment that it is outside of it, active shielding, the necessary for that, GSI, Princeton, Berkeley, and UCLA, and the dozens of prestigious universities from Nottingham to all of the actual study labs like GSI and LIGO and CERN, and all of these places that are designed specifically to create the particles that would be in these fields outside of our, our polarity bands, our magnetosphere, the bow shock. Like even within the magnetosheath, they have a hard time creating what those particles would be outside. It's still a relative. We haven't touched it. We don't know. We've barely touched within the lower bands of our atmosphere. So this video is something I wanted to get on and start a conversation about online, because the magnetosphere that they talk about here, it really needs to be discussed as it's being portrayed falsely. There is absolutely no, it's nonsensical what they're saying, and I'll explain why.
Earth's magnetic field protects us from deadly space radiation. But what if it were drastically weakened? For example, as a precursor to it flipping upside down. I mean, it has before, many, many times.
First off, the Earth doesn't flip upside down, so keep that in mind when you visualize. It's an invisible thing that flips.
Geomagnetic field, lines of magnetic force forged by currents in the planet's molten core erupt from the surface.
First thing I want to talk about is erupts from the Earth's magnetic core. This is just a theoretical point made with very little to no actual evidence. In fact, you can't even really call it a theory at this point. It is a hypothesis, as the highest we've ever gone is about 359 miles. Unless Apollo 13 went higher, and that's why the tank's ionized, and they're just not discussing it yet. or unless it's unmanned, and then it's Orion at 3,600 miles. However, the highest humans have ever gone is 350 miles in 1993 when they flew the space shuttle up to repair the Hubble before it succumbed to orbital decay falling up, and we lost it. So when we talk about, you know, what we're aware of, the deepest we know of the Earth. And there's just, that's it. We've gone in the Mariana Trench, furthest we've gone down. We don't know more than that. We're just assuming, and we're assuming without any evidence outside of just philosophy. And so we don't know what's producing all of the magnetic fields. That's it, period. Everybody is just making shit up and coming up with their own ideas. It could be a great number of reasons. We've only gone 900 miles down. The Earth is 6,200 some odd miles across. Well, that's not the center. So we haven't gone there, we don't know. We can only hypothesize what it could potentially be, as we don't even have actual factual evidence to back a study to prove it as a theory. So there is no proof to their claims. It's nonsense. It's literally nonsensical to make these claims without evidence. So there's that. Second off, the Van Allen belts. Okay, I'm not one of those like, oh, the Van Allen belts, you can't fly through them. Fuck that. You can fly through them. However, as you go through them, your brain shuts off and your body starts to get fluish. By the time you get out of them, you are literally becoming a cancerous tomb. And within weeks, you will be absolutely rotten in all ways possible. GSI has shown this. You can see what happens within 3 seconds to the nucleus of all of our DNA. And to the nucleus, see what happens to our DNA. I mean, just watch the organelles just melt inside of that. There is absolutely no way that we can survive that which he just said, the deep radiation. It's impossible. And it's not that in the belts has radiation. Outside, as you've seen from all of my videos, all of NASA's videos, all the presentations from Princeton and Berkeley, all of it, outside it has 100% of what we only have 1% of. In fact, what the Earth gets, where the ISS is, in the lowest levels of the atmosphere, we get 1% of that 1%. All of my videos, everybody covers this. It should be a relative fact, and a simple thing like the Earth goes around the sun. Should be knowledge everyone understands now. So, when they say the Van Allen belts, do you know where the Van Allen belts are in this? See, that's what I ask most people. I go, oh, okay, so you believe there's the Van Allen belts. You like the two Van Allen belts, right? Because you see those two bands in all of the old textbooks, and you see their graphics. And well, why is it they have so many different types of graphics for these belts? Well, that's because it's not just two belts. This is not just two belts. Can you show me the two basic systems in this? It's not just here and here, because we have a great deal. There's the magnetosheath. Now, what part of the Van Allen belts is the magnetosheath? At what stages is there a difference between the magnetosheath and the magnetopause and the polar cusps regions, and how does that work with the intertwining of those bands? Now, all of these, that's why there's so many names and regions for all the different areas, and why we're learning so much about them with the new MMS mission, and why Themis is being reorganized, and everything is occurring exactly as it's supposed to, so that we can understand all of the neutral points and all of the points that are causing these electromagnetic reconnections, forming all of the plasma and the heavy ionic states that we can't get through, and if we do, we have to encounter even more of once we're outside of it. So that's the first thing I want to discuss, is the 1957 Van Allen belt study that gave us a relative idea as to what this may be, is not to be used anymore. From about 2008 till about 2018, we have put thousands of potential satellites from JAXAs and ESAs in the mesosphere to the upper thermosphere, and some of them in the deep exosphere, taking long swings like Themis. And all of these are gathering some of the greatest information, telling us about what is today the relative science of our magnetosheath and the magnetosphere that is the entirety of Earth's protection. So, if you want to know about actual relative terms, don't use the Van Allen belt terms. Start using their actual names. This in here is the plasmasphere. That's what you would call the inner bands. As there's 3 Van Allen belts, there needs to be terms for every individual section. Out here in these outer bands, that's the magnetosheath. These are deep bands. Now, the magnetosheath can extend all the way out to about 25,000 miles out, so that would bring it all the way up to the top, which still is confined by this huge invisible bow shock that actually contains smaller zipping and inward and outward bands that are still part, not visible here, of the magnetosheath. And so, well, all of these ride in polar cusps, and there's all of the neutral points and that cause all of these anomalies. You need to know their names, and this is very important because this is the reason for climate change, as they're starting to acknowledge. So,
close to the North and South geographic poles, connecting to each other to rig the planet in a dipole field like a giant bar magnet. Magnetic fields exert a force on moving charged particles, causing them to spiral around those force lines.
Now take note, they're starting to acknowledge that these aren't actually the belts, these are just electromagnetic interference points. These are just higher states of plasma, and we're just starting to learn why that is.
Now that's helpful because Earth is constantly bombarded by very fast-moving charged particles, especially coming from the Sun.
Again, take note, 100% of the particles outside of the bow shock. Now this is everything that is every single part of particulate and matter in what space used to be empty. Space is not empty. There's no part of space. Every cubic meter is full of matter, light and matter, and that the light moves matter, or as we're learning with the new 5G systems, gamma X-ray technologies, light is and can be like matter. So, all of this is like a ball in water. Like if you dunked it underwater and then you let go of it, it was supposed to be floating down there by itself, but not having any water touching it, just this invisible shield, keeping all the water from touching it. But every now and then, a dew point drips in, and then the water just like kind of mists and turns into mist all around the inside of it. And that mist slowly makes its way, and some of that forms condensation on the very outer lip. And that outer lip is our atmosphere, the mesosphere. Those are northern lights. So we get 1% of the 1% that makes it through, and the 100% is out here. So again, they're constantly showing, NASA, PB, Spacetime, every single person is always showing this is the fact. And GSI, Princeton, everybody shows what the particle's mass and speed and what it will do to the human cell and everything that it is, and why we're not out there, why every single nation is only 230 miles up, not going any higher, and if we go to the 1,000-mile point later, we will need to create a small thermonuclear propulsion or some type, if not an ion lift, then some type of electromagnetic system to hold us in place, or at least hold off the particles from pushing us back down, because that's why the International Space Station flows between 230 and 250 miles up, is because these heavy particles radiating down on them, they move it up and down. And so as everything goes higher, there'll be more of it, and we're going to need to figure out, okay, well, if we create an isotope like Russia just did and apparently failed, or succeeded, who knows, over in Russia, and are applying that to their, liquid rocket, systems that is fail-safe, and putting it up there and trying to figure out how to use it to create enough energy to push off the energy that's up there, maybe we'll be able to get to 1,000 miles. However, take note of these graphics. These are very important. Without acknowledging the relative science of today, you're still talking 1957 bullshit and acknowledging nothing that is the relative science that shows why this ball in water would have to have something keeping everything off of it, because human beings can never be exposed to this water.
Our magnetic field deflects the worst of these. Not all planets are so lucky. Mars, with its solar core, has no such shield, and so the red planet's atmosphere was stripped away by the solar wind billions of years ago. So, what would happen if the Earth lost its field? Would we lose our atmosphere? Would
Yes.
life be extincted by crazy space radiation?
Yes.
Well, we may get to find out. The magnetic field
I've
is
been calling
currently
this.
undergoing rapid changes, possibly signaling the imminent flipping of its polarity.
Nope.
The North Pole may become the South and the South the North. This is cool.
I'm gonna call this now. We're not heading like Mars, we're heading like Venus. The reason why they don't talk about Venus and why they are making sure everybody focuses all of their attention on Mars is because our atmosphere is becoming exactly like Venus's atmosphere. There are winds kicking up. There's been how many? 4 Category 5 hurricanes? Trump just doesn't want to admit it. Oh, it's a Category 5. Yeah, that's cute. There's reasons for all of this. They're not stupid. They're playing stupid. And they're letting it happen because you're letting it happen. So, all of this, more propaganda. It's not flipping, it's decreasing. It's being ionized. And so it's just as simple as when we don't have as much of what we need, and who knows what that is. But whatever we're doing isn't working, or it's a natural process, and we're probably not helping it, or, well, whatever, ride it all on the way down. And maybe that's why they give Donald Trump the presidency, and maybe that's why everyone's pissing it all away and cutting all the trees down, and we learned this science that's, oh shit, we can't make a magnetosphere, we don't know what it is, we're not going to figure it out in time, things are changing at such a rate that either an ice age is going to kill us, or we're going to burn to death. And so either, philosophy gets their way, and every human's happy, so propaganda.
Called geomagnetic reversal. And during that reversal, we'd be left relatively unprotected for thousands of years. I'll come back to the current situation and whether we should be concerned, but first, why do we think such a thing could happen? Well, because it has in the past, many times. We see it in the geological record. Magnetic materials like iron often form with their natural magnetic field aligned with the Earth's field. We can track the direction of Earth's magnetic field in sedimentary layers and in old volcanic flows. Turns out Earth's field...
I want to point out that there's a reason why we have been studying with all of our rovers, the Curiosity rover, all these things. I'm sorry, they're not on Mars. I've pointed out in my other videos. They're in Chile. They're in the Atacama Desert. They're in places that human beings shouldn't or can't go to, or like Antarctica, where we're just now being able to get to, and we're furthering our exploration greater than we thought we'd ever could because everything's melting. We're starting to find all of these core samples that we've never been able to study before. So we're able to prove that the Earth in these dead spots has accumulated radiation greater than other areas and very specific time frames. So we're learning that it's harder to do carbon dating than we thought it was, and the Earth has probably experienced these cycles several times. There's usually a several degree change to the poles, and we can usually see that within the stars. Most astronomers will be the first ones to point that out. I was noticing about a 5-degree difference some years back and started screaming it to the heavens, but most people don't really care. They don't see it, and so they're like, 5 degrees, huh? Well, what does that mean? Well, that's not a big deal. So this is...
Field has completely flipped direction 183 times over the past 84 million years, so a little more than once per 500,000 years. The last full geomagnetic reversal was over 700,000 years ago, so you might say we're past due. Well, not exactly. In fact, these flips seem to be pretty random events. We may be no more due than we were at any other time in the past 500,000 years. Except for the fact that the magnetic field does seem to be acting strangely lately. But to really understand whether a flip is likely, we need to try to understand how that happened. And for that, we need to understand Earth's magnetic field. Normal.
Alright, first thing I want to point out, The NASA shirt, all of them, the swag, unbelievable. Okay, the magnetosphere. They're about to go off on the iron core causing it, and how, you know, the layers of it are what's going on. They're gonna then talk about one of their machines, you know, has the ability to start spinning sodium and liquid metal at a rate that'll cause gravitational fields and blah 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 blah. This is bullshit. This is the best they can do to try to find distractions or something for someone to talk about, to avoid simple things like, we are using these models, but we do not apply them to any other celestial body but ours. Like ours is one of a kind, or the only one that can be applied to having a magnetosphere, when there's dozens of magnetospheres within our solar system. So let's take a look at our other planets. In fact, look at the greater planets like Neptune or Uranus, and you'll note several things, like Uranus has a magnetosphere that's 30 degrees off its axis point in the center. It's the magnetic core doesn't exist. I guess there's some publications coming out recently where they're just like, it might have an iron core. So I guess if we're going to start slowly applying iron cores to all like the gas giants and like Neptune and all that, then I guess, you know, we can start explaining those anomalies like that. However, that it spins the way that it does, and that it spins the way that it does just outside of its own magnetospheric bands, that, you know, part of the atmosphere is outside of it, all that is indication of several things. One being that the matter falls into it. It seems pretty relative that we can safely say that if you look at relative history, if you look at everything from our stories, you'll find that Venus was once talked about as a rogue planet flying through the solar system and found its place where it is. It was a comet in the sky once, and these type of stories show that it's potential that there was just a space where there was a greater polarity point of here and here, causing polarity flips continuously until it caught matter, or it was just solid there and it pulls matter in. Whatever it is that causes the magnetosphere seems to have already existed, and they're about to talk about it in this very, very simply put by stating that it just enhances what was already there. So the iron core isn't the cause of it. While they're going to talk about it being the cause of it, they'll state very simply that it's not actually the cause of it, but it helps. And so this is why I think that we're going to start having to admit that not only can we not create electromagnetic shielding for our systems, and that's why we're not further out in space, but climate change is a big deal, because where we are assisting in the problem, we can't stop it because we don't even know what's causing it. So if we can't figure out, you know, what creates a magnetosphere, we can't enhance the magnetosphere if it's already something in pre-existing form and the Earth fell into it, or formed because of it, you know, its placement falling. We can't do anything about that. So I guess there's nothing but propaganda left. So here's the show.
We think of magnetic fields being generated in two ways. In magnetic materials like iron, the sum total of the tiny magnetic fields of their constituent particles align to give you a global field. That's your bar magnet or a free magnet. Alternatively,
but these only assist a magnetic field that already exists. These magnets only work because of the Earth's polarity.
For example, in an electromagnet. But Earth's interior is not intrinsically magnetic. It's too hot for iron atoms in the core to spontaneously align. And although the interior is rotating, it's electrically neutral. So there shouldn't be an overall electrical current.
Which is an indication that space is plasma. And everything above us and the polar cusps and the points show that we are a grounding system, and that the universe is electric. And so everything, all of our magnetospheric bands are intertwined with the sun's magnetospheric bands, which they are very clear about. They make that very clear, and they show it in all sorts of graphics. And so because of this, electromagnetic reconnection points are not just confined to our magnetosphere, but the plasma states and the heavy turbulence it will cause outside of the bow shock within the sun's magnetospheric bands colliding with ours would actually be greater than within our magnetospheric bands. So these are more things that show that, you know, there's no way we're out there, and we're not entirely sure we can create something greater than is already the system that is failing.
How then does Earth generate such a gigantic and well-organized dipole magnetic field? Let's start with a quick review of what the interior of the Earth looks like. Beneath the thin crust and 2,900 kilometers of solid mantle lies Earth's core. The 2,400 kilometer thick outer core is molten iron and nickel and some other stuff. I'm not talking about lava here, I'm talking about liquid metal with the viscosity of water. Beneath this layer is the inner core, a 1,200 kilometer radius ball of solid iron.
Again, we have gone 900 miles down. The coal hole is the deepest we've gone. The bits would burn up before reaching any of this. So this is simply someone like Plato sitting around going, yeah. And you know what? A lot of people think I'm fucking smart, and they gave me these papers and this desk. I'm right. This. And I mean, don't get me wrong. We've had the Bible around since 1614 because assholes like that are in charge, so this is nothing new, and play on player, own it. However, 900 miles, that's how far we've gone down. He's talking 32 some odd hundred kilometers, that's no. We just theorize, prophesize, and then preach. So, preach on.
Solid because of the pressure at that depth. At around 5,500 Kelvin temperature, it would instantly melt at lower pressures. Everything is moving down there. The solid core rotates slightly more quickly than the surface. The core's day is a few seconds shorter than a surface day. The outer core has a rotation gradient. The outer layer actually rotates a bit slower than the surface, but it speeds up as you get deeper. And that motion gets even messier. The interior of the Earth is cooling down very slowly, which means the liquid outer core is freezing onto the solid inner core. As the inner core grows, it releases non-iron impurities that flow upwards.
Simulations.
Convection streams.
We think.
These flows are then twisted into
a computer thinks for us too.
Coriolis force, the same effect that produces hurricanes on Earth's surface. It's all of this motion that together produces Earth's magnetic field through a process called the dynamo effect, or so most scientists accept these days.
So, a couple things there I want to point out. First, that they just stated again that the interference of the Earth's magnetic fields affects the interference of magnetic bands, which of course, allows or not the amount of ionization to occur, which of course would affect the hurricanes. And that's the whole reason why I started this video, was talking about how the hurricanes are affected severely and created or destroyed, or their paths changed, or they're stalled by all of the various anomalies from solar energetic particles interference with the magnetosphere. So, talk to your local solar physicist as if he's the next prophet, because like Neil Tyson's new book just pointed out, the fact is an astrophysicist has been the leading front for every single military strategy since Europe started conquering the new worlds. So, as far as everyone considers, this is all hypothesis that is the closest we're going to get to creating a theory, so this is what we hold on to.
And dynamo theory not only explains geomagnetism, but also why Earth's field sometimes reverses its polarity. Here's how it works. In that motion I just described, electrons and nuclei should all be moving together, so no electrical currents. So where does the magnetism come from? The key is that the dynamo effect doesn't really create a magnetic field from scratch. Instead, it amplifies, organizes, and sustains an existing field. I'll come back to where that initial magnetic field comes from. For now, let's just say we start with some weak dipole field. That field passes through the liquid outer core, which is an electrical conductor. Conductors have this cool property that they drag magnetic fields with them. So, if the entire core is rotating with the Earth, then the magnetic field will also rotate. But remember that the rotation of the outer core gets faster towards the center. As a result, the starting magnetic field gets wound up into rings around the axis of rotation, into a torus shape. Now, cut to the second type of motion in the outer core.
Kind of looks like it's still a band about 80 kilometers up.
Twisted into helices by the Coriolis force. Those flows grab hold of our toroidal magnetic field and twist them up further into many little loops. Those loops form magnetic tubes around the
This
Earth's
is why
rotational
GSI,
axis.
CERN, LIGO, all these places are so
generate
important.
toroidal electric currents.
They do many
Now
versions
we
of
have
this.
exactly the conditions of an electromagnet. Organized rings of current which
And then they play
produce
with them.
our giant dipole
Various
field.
scales.
Okay, so start with a weak dipole field and you get a strong one. But where does the initial magnetic field come from in the first place? Well, actually, any weak field, even random bits of field, for example from thermal fluctuations, are enough to initiate this runaway effect. Once started, the field builds to maximum strength.
Again, this is completely disregarding the outer gas planets, which they will touch on. However, when they touch on it, they just go, yeah, it's kind of like these, but not really, because, see, these are a little strange.
In fact, any rotating body with a fluid conductor can produce such a field. The Earth, but also the Sun with its flowing hydrogen plasma, or the liquid metallic hydrogen in Jupiter and Saturn's cores. The field produced by this effect looks pretty organized, but it's not as clean as a bar magnet. It shifts and it moves. In fact, Earth's magnetic field is a highly dynamic beast. The north and south geomagnetic poles are close to the geographic poles, so close to Earth's rotation axis, but are not quite exactly aligned. In fact, they move and shift. The magnetic north pole is currently moving at around 60 kilometers per year, around 5 degrees south of the geographic pole.
So again, I want to point out that they neglected the two planets, the outer gas planets, that talk about why the theory that they're using isn't a theory and it's a blown hypothesis. And also, there's the 5 degrees that I noticed years ago and started screaming about that is now starting to become common knowledge that, oh, hey, we're at that weird shifting point, so that's interesting.
Leaving Canadian territory and heading towards Siberia. The strength of the field across the surface also changes, and all of these shifts are due to changing flows within the outer core. Okay, so what's all this about the magnetic field flipping over? In fact, how can it flip? Surely the direction of the magnetic field depends on the direction Earth is spinning. Actually, no. It depends on the direction of these giant electrical currents, which in turn depend on the direction of small magnetic loops generated by these helical convection flows. In fact, we expect that if the magnetic field were switched off entirely, it would re-establish itself randomly, with the north and south magnetic poles aligned either one way or the other. In the geological record, there seems to be no pattern to when the field flips, nor to which alignment is preferred. So, that's probably how the flip happens. Earth's magnetic field isn't necessarily switched off, but it's scrambled in some way. It then builds up again, choosing its direction randomly. When it does a full flip, we call it a geomagnetic reversal, and when the field just glitches but ends up in the same direction it started, we call it a geomagnetic excursion. there are a few ideas on how these glitches might happen.
These are different
It may
than the
be that some
regional
event triggers a
polarity
disruption in
swaps
the
for
flow
high and
within
low
the outer
pressure
core.
that will occur
This could be an
within
asteroid or comet
various
impact,
continents.
an
There's
interaction between
dozens
the core
of
and the
those
mantle, for example,
within
formation
various
of a new
areas.
magma plume, or the subduction of a continental plate. There's no clear evidence of any of these triggers, however, and so most scientists think these geomagnetic events are just a natural part of dynamo behavior, in which the chaotic motion of outer core fluid causes a tangling of magnetic field lines and a global drop in field strength.
And so that right there, that is why there are two sides of science. I'm not for either, I'm not promoting either of them, I'm just stating those are your two sides of science. You've got one stating that man is causing it. You've got one stating that it's a natural cycle, and both of them are showing the exact same, that they produce the same results. So they're both heading towards the same future. So it's not that it's one or the other, it's that it's those. So it is going to inevitably happen, and they've stated in this video alone, we don't know how many years that's left. It could be 2050, we're all dead. It could be 2500 and we're all dead. There's really no telling. The flipperty could have happened. So this is the best that they can do, is talk about that, it's global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it. It's just here. It's gonna happen. You can't stop it. We can make better tools and try to figure it out if we all started focusing on it more, and I guess if we have to militarize it and make everybody get all national pride filled and force it into them that way, then I guess that's how we're going to go about it. And we'll make a space force, and we'll make it political and announce its policies and that they are politically based, so everyone doesn't go, oh, NASA's not political, it's just a public place for people to know what's happening in space and in science. Bullshit. It's a response to Sputnik. So
now, the question you should be asking is, how do we know all of this? Well, the fact is, it's not easy. Computer simulations show that the dynamo effect should indeed produce a large-scale dipole field that spontaneously reverses, although the details are still a little elusive.
We wouldn't even know
For
it
those of you
happened.
who don't trust computer simulations, how about building our own giant spinning ball of molten metal? There are several of these liquid sodium experiments in operation.
Polarities.
They simulate the dynamo effect in the
It's
outer
already
core
using
quite nicely, and even
power. It doesn't have its own smaller source to amplify that is not subject to ours. They are not outside of Earth's magnetic field using a smaller one to amplify, to create one to show exactly how that's made. So that isn't actually a legitimate study for the scientific point they're trying to create. It's just a study of a ball creating a magnetosphere within a magnetosphere. So I guess it might be another study showing us trying to create active shielding to amplify our crafts a little greater than they are to assist our failing active shielding, or if we wanted to go into space about 1,000 kilometers up and we needed more active shielding. So that seems like a pretty logical thing if you wanted to, create your own system and assist with Russia's isotope systems and have those all work together to either create a shield for here, which doesn't seem relative yet, or put it on a spacecraft and go 1,000 miles up, higher than we can go now, and use it there to stay safe from the ionization that we can't stop talking about.
Instantaneous polarity flips. Whatever the mechanism for geomagnetic reversals really is, we know it happens and will surely happen again. But is it happening now? The International World Magnetic Model is a global map of Earth's magnetic field updated every...
So I want to point out that that's why, say I'm in this region right here. I'm one of the hippies in Oregon, and we usually have several high-low pressure spots caused by smaller, what look like, if we were the sun, what look like sunspots. And our polarity point's the same as you would find on the sun. And so when you stare at the chromosphere and all of our ways of looking at it, you'll find a lot of similarities in the movement and the pattern of everything on the sun, as you do with our weather bands. And you'll find that the majority of the magnetic bands of the sun act as the same as ours. And so from small to large, from atomic to universal, this is seeming to be all the same.
5 years. In the past, that's been frequent enough to account for small changes, but not anymore. The WMM scientists found that the Earth's north magnetic pole was moving so quickly that they updated nearly a year early, at the beginning of 2019, and they'll update again at the end of the year. But does this mean that the field is preparing to flip? Not really. I mean, maybe. But we know that the field must fluctuate quite a bit, even when it's not about to reverse. We'll need to see a lot more disruption before we start to worry. How bad is that?
Being ionized.
Well, a bit bad, probably, but
More.
not catastrophic. There's no evidence of increased extinction rates associated with any of the past reversals. Like I said, the field weakens but doesn't switch off.
It wouldn't hurt anything. You
So
wouldn't
there
even
may
know.
be higher incidences of cancer and other mutations from more high-energy particles reaching the ground, and probably will have to get much better at shielding satellites from the solar wind. The field also becomes very messy, with many north and south magnetic poles popping up across the surface of the planet.
So like I just said, and like they just said, all of the stuff that I've been talking about, the gamma and X-ray exposure and the heavier ionization that is making its way to the Earth because of the anomalies of either the greater solar storms or the heavier weight of the consistent that is the solar energetic particle that is always irradiated from the sun. There have been some very interesting anomalies that the MMS and various ones have recorded over the last few years, and the stereo has recorded and shown us with SOHO and SDO a great number of catastrophic storms that if they would have hit us, it would have just stripped bands, like we talk about Martian surface just being completely irradiated by the solar storms that hit it. So potentially it could happen at any minute. The flip could happen at any minute, but bottom line, what they're hinting at mostly here is there is a constant particle that is hitting us, and because of the strength of the magnetosphere weakening, there is going to be a greater amount of it, and that's really the only serious risk as of right now. Is the climate is changing because of the heavier ionization, and because of that we're being more heavily radiated, and our systems up there will need more protection. So between 230 and 1,000 miles, if we want anything up there, we're going to need better protection for our systems. So where we might have been able to have done about 400, 350 miles up, maybe 400 back in the 90s. We probably can't do that anymore because there's just more ionization occurring. There's less protecting us, or at least it's not doing as well protecting us and letting more in for some reason. So yeah, that's them stating it once again.
Species of migrating bird, as well as old-timey sea captains, are going to be very confused for a while. As the classic
Saw my last video with my bird, right? I'm an old-timey sea
work?
captain.
Fortunately, scientists have a pretty good idea, and they think that Earth's
felt
magnetic field is
like a
likely to
bird.
hold out for our lifetimes, and those of some generations to come. For now, at least, we remain protected from the worst
some
ravages of
generations
solar
to come.
storms and of our dangerously irradiated space-time. Hey everyone.
So I'm gonna back that one up one more time so you can make sure you hear that, because
sea captains are going to be very confused for a while.
deadly space
As the
radiation.
classic song goes, magnets, how do they work? Fortunately, scientists have a pretty good idea, and they think that Earth's magnetic field is likely to hold out for our lifetimes, and those of some generations to come. For now, at least, we remain protected from the worst ravages of solar storms and of our dangerously irradiated space-time. Hey everyone, comment responses will return shortly. But before we sign off today, there are two important things. First,
Sell
we'd
it.
like to thank all Patreon supporters.
Alright,
You
and
guys-
that's the last thing I'm going to leave on. Alright, so I'm not a YouTuber. I'm sitting in my living room right now, about to go to bed, sitting in my PJs, just bitching about all of this nonsense. The political games, the fucking capitalist market, the constant propaganda. I actually don't give a shit. It doesn't mean anything when I make these videos. I'm not trying to inspire anyone. I like to sit back every now and then and be like, yeah, I remember calling that shit, and then 4 years later, everyone was like, yeah, I was thinking that might be a possibility. I'm like, yeah, I know, I said that fucking years ago, but everyone was like, no, that's fucking science fiction, that doesn't make sense. I was screaming about Leonard Susskind in 2006, before the black hole wars started, and he put that book out against Stephen Hawking and completely destroyed the multi-universe and all of that by making, Alice and propeller theory and the hologram universe a more potential fucking accepted theory. And so, this is nothing new to me. I'm not a YouTuber, I'm just some guy talking some shit on these fucking assholes paid to sell you guys what you think. So, Patreon, I don't have it. I don't want your money. I don't want your support. You know what I want? I want you to start fucking thinking for yourself. Maybe we'll fight over stupid shit like, I'm gonna go to the game this weekend, learn about how I can fucking teach my kid to fight with other people so that, when I put them in games, they'll grow up in the army later because it's all practice for fight, win, dominate. You're the better one. Show them. Take it. Fuck, people. Grow up. This is stupid. I'm out.